Welcome back, boss ladies. In this video, we're going to talk about the 23 imposter syndrome symptoms or signs that you've been missing or maybe even ignoring. What I want you to do for this video is grab a pen and grab a paper or start making notes in the comments as to which one of these applies to you. And let's jump in with number one. The first sign or symptom of imposter syndrome is the 100% qualification syndrome. This shows up the most in women in corporate settings where they think they have to have 100% of the qualifications in order to be entitled to a job, to even apply for that job. And it shows up for women in business as well. If we see an opportunity, we think we have to have at least all of the qualifications, if not more, in order for us to put ourselves in the running for that opportunity. A person without imposter syndrome will put themselves into the running if they have 50, 60, 70% of the qualifications because they know they don't have to be perfect in order to make a good impact. So next time you see yourself in that situation where you think you're not checking all the boxes, I want you to challenge yourself to go for it anyway. Number two is what we call the ready, aim syndrome. This is where you go ready, aim, 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 and you never actually fire. We see this in women who are over planning, who are over educating themselves. I need one more certificate and then I can do X, Y, or Z, or who are otherwise over organizing and over qualifying themselves before they're willing to take any action. If you see yourself doing all the things to prepare, but never actually pulling the trigger, you can know that this is a sign or symptom of imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome number 3 is over apologizing. You apologize for being late. You apologize if somebody's waited on you for 10 seconds. You apologize if you had to take care of something that was important. You apologize for just taking up space and having a voice. You apologize for having an opinion. You apologize for not feeling good, as though you actually owe somebody an apology. Oftentimes we're doing this because we're trying to make up for the fact that inherently we just don't feel good enough. We feel a sense of shame or discomfort, and so we're apologizing for taking up space. If you catch yourself doing this, I want you to ask yourself, am I really struggling with imposter syndrome here and it's just showing up as over apologizing, or is this just a habit that I need to break? Imposter syndrome symptom number 4 is being the wallflower. If you get together at networking events, online or offline, and you find yourself pulling back, just observing, not willing to get into conversations, not sharing opinions, thoughts, tips, strategies, things that are working for you, and just kind of taking it all in, this could definitely be a sign of imposter syndrome because you don't feel confident or comfortable enough to be in that limelight. You don't think that you have what it takes or that you know what you're talking about. And so you'll pull back so that nobody thinks or finds out that you're a fraud. Symptom number 5 that you may be struggling with imposter syndrome is actually when you are overly confident. If you can show up in a situation and you're just constantly talking about all the good things that you're doing and you're one-upping people in their conversations and you're maybe even telling other people they're doing it wrong, they should be doing it like you, a lot of times when this happens, this is coming from a place of insecurity. We're trying to make up for the fact that we don't feel good enough by showing all the ways in which we are actually better than others. So whether you see this in yourself or you see this in other people, a lot of times the underlying fear is still, we're not good enough. Symptom number 6 is worrying what other people think. What will they think if I send this email? What will they think if I do this thing, if I wear this thing, if I try this strategy, if I try to make money, if I make too much money, if I don't make enough money? What will they think about what I'm wearing or how my hair is or whatever it is? We will be overly concerned with people's opinions when we're too worried or we feel insecure about ourselves. If we don't feel good enough, we're going to look for that validation in other people and we're going to worry that it's not going to be there. There is a time and a place to be concerned with what other people are thinking. And especially when you run a business, you should definitely be thinking about your ideal clients and customers. But you should also remember that just because somebody criticizes you or they don't like you doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It may just mean that they're not your people. So we need to be really concerned or aware of what our ideal people are thinking, but we don't need to be concerned about the wrong people. If you want to learn how to stop stop worrying about what other people think, make sure you check out the video below this description after you finish this one. Symptom number 7 is probably the most commonly related one to imposter syndrome, and that is the fear of being found out. Oh my gosh, somebody's gonna find out that I don't have X, Y, or Z certification, or that I only have this much experience, or that I really don't know what I'm doing. When in fact, we don't realize that everybody out there feels the same way. Nobody has any clue of what they're doing. We're all worried about being found out until we realize that there's nothing to find out, that it's okay to be imperfect and you can still actually be a good person doing great things in the world. Symptom number 8 could be described as avoiding new things, or a resistance to change, or just liking things to stay the same. And this generally comes down to not those new things, but a fear of failure. We're going to fear failure and avoid things that might lead to failure, and therefore only do things that we feel we can confidently succeed in. But this means it's going to limit our opportunities. It's going to limit what we can do, how we can do it, how far we can go in our businesses or in our lives, because we're not taking calculated, smart risks. We're not taking any risks at all. Symptom number 9 is so common, but so easily missed. And that is doubting that what you do matters. When you're struggling with imposter syndrome, you start to think that your role, even your industry, is not that important, that it's not making a difference, or that it's not really needed. If you've ever had those thoughts in the back of your mind, does this really matter? Is what I'm doing actually important? It may actually be that you're struggling with imposter syndrome, but it's showing up as thinking that your work itself is not good enough versus you. Imposter syndrome symptom number 10 is assuming that anyone can do what you can do because it's easy, right? It's easy for you at least. And so it's easy for you to say, well, I can't charge what it's really worth because this is easy. This is simple. It doesn't take me any time at all. And therefore, I shouldn't be making money at it. The truth of the matter is that what you do, so many people cannot do. They need your help and they will gladly pay for it. But if you feel like an imposter, you're going to constantly doubt what you're doing, think that it's not important, and think that you shouldn't be making money at it because other people can do it too, right? Symptom number 11 goes along very closely with 9 and 10. And this is where you start to question, are you even in the right business? Is this really what I should be doing? Maybe I should be doing this thing over there. If you came into this business with passion and then you started having doubts and looking at other things, especially shiny objects, things that feel more exciting when this work started to get difficult, that can actually be a sign of imposter syndrome. When our fear, when our overwhelm, when our self-doubt starts to come up, what do we naturally do? We start to look for something else that feels better. We start to look at other things we could be doing instead, and we start to doubt that we're on the right path. If you got into your business with excitement, I want you to remember that that excitement's not always going to be there. And just because the honeymoon phase wore off doesn't mean you're in the wrong business. Number 12 is perfectionism. If you don't feel like you're good enough, if you feel like a fraud or you feel like an imposter, a lot of times we try to overcompensate by trying to make everything perfect, by not allowing ourselves to make any mistakes. And so we'll proofread something a million times, or we'll spend months and months and months and months and months on a project we could have gotten done in weeks, simply because if it's perfect, then maybe we can prove to ourselves that we are in fact good enough to be doing what we're doing. This, of course, is a dead end because nothing is ever going to get perfect. And what you create now is always going to look like child's play to what you can create 5 to 10 years from now. So if you get trapped in the trap of perfectionism, you're going to get stuck there and you're going to eventually end up quitting because you can't make it perfect when you think it has to be. Imposter syndrome symptom 13 is workaholism. I know absolutely nothing about this one whatsoever. No, really, truth is, my first business failed because of imposter syndrome. But I didn't know it because I was working 7 days a week, 16 hours a day to try to overcompensate for those failures in my own mindset that were showing up as failures in my business. So if you find yourself overworking, not able to shut it off, trying to just give more and more and more, it may be because you're trying to fill a gap that you think is there. If you don't think that you're good enough or your work's not good enough, a lot of times you're going to spend so much more time on it again, trying to perfect it. And that's going to lead to some really bad habits and some really chronic illnesses. Ask me how I know. Number 14 is criticizing your own work. When you feel like an imposter, sometimes we'll hide it, but sometimes we'll actually point out our flaws. Maybe we do this because we're afraid that if we don't, other people will just think we're foolish or stupid or completely delusional that we don't see these problems. Maybe we're just trying to beat other people to the punch because if we say it, it won't hurt as much if they also say it. But whatever it is, it's a really common sign or symptom of imposter syndrome. Symptom number 15 is sabotaging opportunities. If you actually see yourself doing things that cause you harm, that set you back, that mess you up in some way, this is often a sign of imposter syndrome. We'll keep ourselves out of that risk zone, away from that fear of failure by messing ourselves up ahead of time. A great example of this is if you have a big opportunity on a Saturday and you go out drinking Friday night so that you're hungover and you feel terrible come Saturday. Oftentimes we'll do this because then if we don't show up to our fullest capability, we can blame something else, versus if we show up to our fullest capability and we flop, then we have nobody to blame but ourselves, our skills, or who we are. So if we're struggling with imposter syndrome, we will often do something that will keep us down so that we don't rise to a level that we think we can't actually hit. If self-sabotage is something you're struggling with, be sure that you watch the video in the description below after this one. Number 16 is procrastination, and this is probably one of the more common symptoms of imposter syndrome. If you don't feel good enough, if you feel like a fraud, you're just gonna put off the work that you need to do because you don't think you're gonna be able to do it well enough. You don't think you're gonna be able to do it to a certain standard. And so you end up just putting it off, procrastinating, and letting it pile up until the stress piles up, and then you can blame something else. You can blame time, you can blame too much to do, but you never have to look at the fact that you just don't feel capable of what you need to do. Number 17 is comparisonitis. This is where we look at our so-called competition and we compare everything. How many followers do they have compared to how many followers I have? What's their website look like compared to what my website looks like? If we don't feel good enough, we're going to start to look for examples that actually prove that. This is one of the most twisted things that our brain does, but it does it all the time. If you believe that you are not good enough, you will go around looking for people that you think hit the standard that you need to hit. Then you'll start comparing all the ways in which they are hitting it and you are not. And what will that do? It will drag you further down into a pit of despair. This is one of the more common things that we see with imposter syndrome, and it's definitely the most debilitating. Once again, if comparisonitis is something you struggle with, make sure you check out the videos below after you finish this one. Number 18, deflecting praise. If somebody gives you a compliment, if they say that your work is good and you have a tendency to push it aside, brush it off, or show them, tell them how they're actually wrong. Oh, it's not that good. I messed up on this and I did that. That can often be a sign of imposter syndrome. I like to actually think to myself when I catch myself doing this, oh, my imposter syndrome is showing. When we don't feel good enough, we cannot accept from other people any amount of praise that rubs up against that belief. So if you catch yourself doing this, make sure you stop yourself. And if this is something you struggle with a lot, I want you to watch the video on how to accept compliments professionally, because once you learn the habit, you can actually start changing the mindset behind it. Number 19 is very similar, and this is discrediting praise. This is basically assuming that A, they either don't know what they're talking about, or B, they're just trying to be nice. They don't really mean it. Basically, somebody will give you a compliment and you just don't think it's worth anything. If you catch yourself doing this, this could definitely be a sign of imposter syndrome. And I want to challenge you to just say thank you and just feel like, hey, maybe they actually do think that, and maybe, just maybe, their opinions are valid too. Number 20 is taking criticism personally. If somebody gives you feedback, whether it's helpful or it's meant to be hurtful, but you take it to heart, it stings, it hurts a little, this is often because it's rubbing up against your own belief system. And you can know this is true because if somebody criticizes something that you have absolutely no doubt in, they look crazy, not you, right? But if somebody criticizes something that you've got a little bit of doubt in, you've got a little bit of fear around, it's gonna feel so much more intense. So when you're feeling that intensity from their criticism, when it's really hitting you hard, that's telling you that there's something inside of you that you get to address. Now, here's the other thing. You also need to remember whose criticism you're listening to. Just like we were talking about with ideal clients before. If somebody's criticizing you, but they're not your ideal client, that's not an opinion you should be worrying about. If somebody's criticizing you, but they are not an example of who you want to be or the life that you want to live, if you wouldn't take their advice, why would you take their criticism? Number 21 is another really subtle one, and this is when you get totally wiped out by big opportunities. A lot of people assume that they're introverts when they're actually not. They're just spending so much energy trying to save face, trying to present themselves in just the right place or the right way, trying to look and sound and be perfect. And it takes so much freaking energy that they're totally wiped out after that opportunity. Whether it's on stage or in an interview, in a conversation with somebody, they're just tapped out. This doesn't always mean that you're an introvert. It could actually just mean that you're trying to protect yourself and this belief that you're not good enough by going above and beyond. It's taking a lot of emotional energy, a lot of physical energy, and it's bottoming you out by the end of it. Imposter syndrome symptom or sign number 22 is you think you didn't earn your success. You think it was given to you by other people. You think you lucked into the opportunity. So I've heard people blame their looks. I've heard people blame their accent. Whatever it is, it never comes down to the work that you put in on yourself, in your industry, in the work that you're doing. This is especially common today when we're so much more aware of privileges. It's so much easier for us to feel guilt or shame over accomplishments. But if you've worked hard for something, you need to give yourself credit. Don't diminish what you've done. Number 23 is using weak or minimizing language. Anytime we're not speaking clearly and directly, when we're softening our thoughts, we're softening our opinions, or we're looking for approval in what we're saying, we're going to fill in the gaps or add words to what we're saying that minimize the impact. So some examples of this could be I just, I think, maybe, perhaps, actually, you know, right, okay. Those last ones especially are what we'll put at the end of a sentence when we want to make sure the other person is agreeing with what we're saying. This is probably one of the most common symptoms of imposter syndrome, but it's also one of the ones that's easiest to miss. And I do want to add, this can also just be a bad habit. So if you're seeing yourself doing this, just ask yourself, where's this coming from? Is this just a habit, or am I actually trying to bring in justification to what I'm saying or soften what I'm saying because I don't feel comfortable or confident just saying what's real for me? Knowing these 23 imposter syndrome symptoms, super helpful so we can catch ourselves in the act. But you also need to know what's causing your imposter syndrome, and you need to know what can you actually do to change these underlying beliefs that are creating these habits. If you just focus on the habits, it could be a lot like focusing on the fever instead of the infection. We need to get down to the root of it. And if this is something you know you're struggling with, if you said yes to too many of these things, I want you to consider grabbing my Overcoming Imposter Syndrome Masterclass. You can see the link in the description below. This masterclass was designed to be taken and completed in one short afternoon. It's going to walk you through everything you need to know about your imposter syndrome so you can understand it and so you can tackle it. And it's going to show you the 8 steps that you need to take to start dismantling it and start feeling confident instead. You can learn more about it and get the class for yourself in the link above my head, as well as in the description below. And if you're brand new here, you should know my name is Tara Wagner. I'm a belief breakthrough coach and have been for the past 10 years. I help female entrepreneurs get their heads, their hearts, and their habits straightened out so they can crush their goals, not their soul. If that sounds like your jam, be sure to subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, check out the other videos that I have for you linked in the description. Give this video a thumbs up if you found it helpful, and don't forget to comment and let me know what you thought. Thank you so much for being here. I'll see you in the next one.